What's up, Black and Tan family? Donald here. It's just me in the shop today. We're going to have our special guest and Paul come in live from.
All right. You see Jill's? How are you, brother?
I'm good.
Jill's coming on now. And Tan podcast, Instagram Live, and we are very, very excited to welcome Jill Patterson to our podcast, Instagram Live, and talk bikes with her. I met Jill 6 or 7 years ago in the second part of my cycling journey, and as she's dropping me on a climb in Frederick somewhere, I said, Jill, what did you do? She's like, oh, I raced pro bikes in Japan. I'm like, wait a second, we need to talk about that. But why don't we start off, Jill? Just give us your background a little bit about how you got into cycling, and then we'll move forward from there. So.
Okay, so I went to Japan to teach English, and it was going to be a year-long thing. And while I was there, I couldn't do any of the activities and sports that I like to do in the US. Like, I had done a lot of hiking and rock climbing and just outdoor sports in general. And biking was the one thing that had always intrigued me, but I hadn't tried before, and it was one of the few things I could do in Japan. So I lived on a little island, and I went to the mainland, and I bought a bike, and I brought it back to the island, and I would just ride circles around the island, and it took me about 30 minutes for a lap. And then the year, I was intending to stay only a year, it turned into another year, and I moved to the mainland, and I, of course, brought my bike, and that's where I really got into it, because there was a bike shop there, and I would join the weekly shop ride. And so it wasn't just me biking by myself, it was me biking against people, and that was really fun, and or with people. And I loved the competition of that. I loved the community, the camaraderie, and then I did some bicycle touring, and then it was like a snowball. It took off from there.
When you were biking around the island, so you did 30 minutes, let's say, the first time, were you trying to do it faster and faster each time, or was that like, were you there already in the race mentality, or you're just kind of like just enjoying?
No, pretty much just enjoy. I think the race mentality came out when I was around other people, and especially because I got dropped very badly on my first rides. I didn't like that, and I was like, okay, I don't want that to happen. And so, I tried my best to get stronger, and I remember when I stopped getting dropped and I could like hang on to the back, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. And then I remember when I was like in the middle, and then I got to the front of the group, and then I was the one dropping everybody. So it was a really fun progression, but of course it took a few years. And my year in Japan ended up being 10 years. Wow. So I was, so, it started sort of as just a hobby, a passion, and then there was it wasn't a pro team. I would say maybe we could call it semi-pro. Like, it was a high-level women's team in Japan, but at the time they didn't have pro teams. And I was able to join that team, which was like an amazing chance as like a foreigner. I'm not Japanese. And I got to travel with them. I got to do some UCI races internationally. And that was kind of like dipping my feet into the high level of what racing is. And honestly, my level at the time, I never should have been doing those races. I was not good. I didn't know what was happening. I think if I did it now, I would actually be a lot better. I'd be a smarter racer. But it was like kind of trial by fire, just go and do it and see what happens. So that was a really great opportunity.
How long did you race for that team?
That team was probably about maybe 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you come back to the States from there?
Yes. So I raced with them. I did the international stage races, and I completely burned out of racing. Like, I remember I was actually doing, I think it was the Joe Martin stage race in the US with my team. And it was a little overwhelming because one, I really, honestly, level-wise, shouldn't have been there. It was just overwhelming, like, in general, riding with people at that level. But I'd also been acting as kind of like the translator and the travel organizer and just taking care of everything. So it was just a lot on my plate, and I think I just kind of burned out. And I remember I was in the crit, And it was the first crit I'd really ever done in my life. And of course, I got dropped immediately. And I just remember going around and people were like, yeah, good, you can do it. And like eventually the applause stopped. And I was just like, how many more times do I have to go around the circuit? And I would look at the official like with my eyes every time I passed, like pleading, like, please cut me. Like, I want this to be over. Finally, she cut me. And I got off there and I was like, you know what? I'm so burnt out. I'm just never going to race again. And that was kind of like, okay, I'm going to give up biking. I'm going to give up racing. And I moved back to the US after that.
All right.
So I thought I was going to get like this whole kind of life transition thing. I'd been 10 years in Japan, came back to the US, really didn't know what I wanted to do because what I'd been doing in Japan it didn't transfer well to the US. So it was kind of like fresh start. So I moved to this area because I had family here, and they were like, you know what, come stay with us and you can get your feet back on the ground. So as I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with my life now that, 10 years gone, it's a tough transition to come back. And I was like, you know what, I do enjoy biking. I don't want to race, but I want to bike. So I started hopping into the group rides here. And that's kind of when everything started coming back. And I was like, wow, biking really is fun. And things kind of went from there.
Mm-hmm. Are you on Artemis at this point, or you're just?
They were yes. So I was just hopping around on group rides at first, and I was strong. I was a strong rider, so I made an impression on people. And Super Dave, of course, heard about me and met me, and he was like, why don't you join Artemis? And I said, well, I don't want to race. And he's like, that's fine, just join our team. You can try racing if you want. And him and Cheryl were just very kind. They did not pressure me to do any of that. And I think I was kind of like a little still PTSD from just everything in Japan, just kind of racing and training and not doing it the right way. And I just didn't want to repeat that. So I was on Artemis for a few years, and I did a couple local races, but they were more crits and not really my thing. And I had never heard of Grand Fondos, and Amilcar on Artemis, he told me, he's like, you would do great in this Grand Fondo. I want to sponsor you. So he actually, him and his company, Pikesville Jewelry, were amazing. And because of him, I feel like he kind of started my whole new venture of like the next step in my racing. And I'm not a crit racer, I'm not a pro racer, but I became a Grand Fondo racer because of him. And I did this race and I absolutely loved it. It was the Frederick Grand Fondo. And then I won that one, and then he was like, you know what, I want you to do the New York Grand Fondo.
That's the big time. That's the big time.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, what's that? Okay, sure. And I did that. The first year was 2018. And because that was a bigger race, I hired a coach. And that was kind of the first time in 2017, I started training with a coach. And that was really when I was learning, okay, this is what real training is, and this is what you do. And I got second place, and then that lit the fire for the next year. I was like, you know what, I think I might be able to win this. And so tried again, and I got first.
Talk to me a little bit about that difference in your training in Japan, what you were doing versus when you got a coach. I'm interested in and now that you are a coach, we'll get more into that in a little bit, but certainly talk to it. How did that change you as a rider? What specifically were you doing different? What mistakes were you making back then that you realized, hey, this is not what I should be doing? Yeah.
So I really did not know anything about training when I was in Japan. I got a power meter, so I was familiar with that. I was watching my heart rate, but it would be more in retrospect. I would finish a ride and then I'd see, okay, what did I do? And I would just kind of track the trends. And my approach was just ride harder, I'll get better. Which up to a certain point, yes, that works, and I did get better. But as you know, you kind of plateau. So I think that was one of the reasons why I burned out. I just was kind of doing the same thing over and over every day, plateaued, did it too much, burned out. With a coach, of course, it was, you know, you do intervals, you do structure, you have your really hard days, you have your really easy days, and you ride to power. And that was the first time I was ever training to power, like using it and watching it as I was riding. And once you start doing that, that really kind of opens the door for improvement. And so that's when I really got interested in, okay, what am I doing? I want to learn more about this. I went to the classes, I studied, I took the power certification, and I was just very fascinated about it. And then that started my journey to becoming a coach.
So you're all into your data now, looking at those numbers.
Yes.
And who are you working? I don't want to throw another company under the bus, knowing the company you work for now, but are you working with the same company you're working with now, or was this somebody
Well,
else?
actually, so now I'm on my own.
Okay,
I
okay,
used
all
to
right.
work for a coaching company,
Okay,
yeah, but I left them about 2 years
okay.
ago, and I went completely on my own, and it's been working really well. Luckily, this area, it's just a cycling mecca, and I feel very lucky to live in this area. I feel like it'd be a different situation if I lived someplace else. I don't think I'd be able to work on my own, but right now it is working. But I am not coaching myself right now. I have coached myself before, and that actually, I think the year I won GFNY, I was coaching myself. So I know I can do it, but I want the accountability that a coach brings, and I also learn from my coach. You know, every coach has a different approach, and I think it's important. I've had 2 different coaches right now in my life, and I'm friends with other coaches, and I've worked with other coaches, so I learned something from all of them. So that's part of the reason why I have a coach now.
If I feel like if you're not learning, if you have a coach and you're not learning anything, it's not beneficial at all anyway. I mean, if you have a coach, you have to learn something from that coach. He has to be coaching you, or she has to be coaching you in a way that
Yeah,
benefits you. If
and
not, what's the point?
luckily, I think people who come to me for coaching, they have that growth mindset already. You know, like they want to learn, they want to work hard. So I'm very lucky in that I would say all of my athletes definitely have that. You know, I'm teaching them what the metrics mean. I'm teaching them about how to think about their cycling. You know, I don't want them to just follow a formula. I want them to know why. I want them, because it's not just the fitness either. It's about what they're doing in the group rides. It's their mindset. It's like how they're responding to the other riders around them. So we talk about all of that. You know, they're doing the workouts. That's the physical, but we also talk about the mental and just what they're doing in general when they're riding. Very important to learn.
What style coach are you? Are you like more for road? What discipline are you specialized in? Road, mountain, gravel? What are we talking?
Great question. So I specialize, I would say, in gravel and road. I have most of my athletes, I would say, are road. I have a handful of gravel. I have one woman who's actually mountain biking. She started as road, and then she went to mountain biking. And so it's, you know, it's transferable. I'm able to coach her on that. And a lot of my athletes, I think every coach sort of has a niche, and I'm finding that my niche is more the hobby athlete. You know, I'm not coaching the pros. You know, I could, but that I would actually almost prefer to just coach the athletes like me because I can relate to them. I understand them, and I'm always in my own mind. I'm actually really glad that I had those few years where I kind of messed up my own training. You know, I was doing it on my own because I learned a lot. You know, I learned what it's like to go from zero and figure it out yourself. Like I didn't have someone guiding me, so I had to figure these things out. And so when I'm coaching, I'm kind of trying to channel that mindset. And so the athletes I tend to enjoy coaching are those athletes who maybe have been doing it on their own for a while. You know, they're focusing on maybe grand fondos or local group rides, you know, nothing like national level necessarily, but I find that I can really help them, and they have a lot of potential and growth.
My guess, Jill, is you have a variety of people coming to you, but do those people who have hit that plateau come and see you, and you can work them through that? I mean, I see a lot of people who get into the sport. They can do a lot on their own, and you're right, they can work hard and then they hit it, and then they don't know how to overcome that next. You know, how do I get to that next step?
Yeah.
What do I need to do in my training? Do you find a lot of those in your work?
I do, and actually, I have a lot of athletes who are 60 years old and above. So most of them have been biking many, many, many years, and they have hit plateaus in some ways. And it's not just physically, it could be mentally, and they just need to sort of find a new challenge, a new goal. And so I work with them on that too. But yeah, that's a very common thing. And I think, you know, it's just so easy to do the same thing over and over here, especially we so many group rides. You know, you could just do the same group rides every day of the week and you're good, but you're going to stagnate there. So we do talk about, I look at their data, I look at the specifics, and I can pull from that, you know, how to, basically I find what are they not doing, and then I tell them to do that.
In the literature, a lot of coaches are worried about group rides. You don't seem to be worried about it. You seem to say, let's incorporate it.
That's a very loaded question. It's a great point. Yes. Okay. So group rides serve a purpose. They can serve a very good purpose. You know how I mentioned earlier, half of it's the physical and half of it's kind of like the mental and tactics. Well, if you're always riding by yourself, you're never going to get better at the tactics. And that was me. For many years, I was just basically riding by myself. I mean, I wasn't training, I was just riding. But we didn't have groups in Japan. And if we did have groups, it'd be like 4 people, which is not a group ride, you know. So the reason I got so much better when I moved from Japan and actually quit the racing, like I got better in America, is because of those group rides. Because I learned the tactics, I learned how to respond to the people. So all the physical strength I had, I didn't know what to do with it. And I actually, by doing group rides, I learned what to do with it, and I applied it, and I got so much better. So I do think group rides have a very good purpose. But that said, you do have to choose your group rides wisely. You know, if you choose one that is like way hard and you're just trying to hang on and struggle, well, okay, you're going to get physically stronger. You're probably not going to work on tactics all that much because you're just struggling so much to hold on. You need to find a mixture of group rides. Maybe once a week you can have that like that horribly difficult, like just struggling group ride, but don't do that every day. The other days, maybe choose a slightly easier group ride where you can play, you know, like you're not hanging out the back. You have a little bit more energy, so you can attack, you can have fun, you can like, you know, try to drop people and learn tactics that way. So
I feel like
group rides.
You're setting me up for a Donald criticism.
Yeah, you know exactly what I was going. You knew exactly what I was going. Like that. See, that only works for 1 or 2 people in the group ride, right? Mm-hmm. And then the people that are behind them, like you said, group rides are not are more than 4, right? So the other 20 people behind them, they're not enjoying it as much.
Yeah.
Like it's the first 2 or 3 people that are doing all the work, and then the rest of us are kind of just suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I mean, you can suffer in, so I'm often riding with people who are stronger than me. Like usually I'm riding with mostly men, and they are stronger than me. And so, yes, I'm suffering, but I'm also learning how to find the draft, whose wheel to follow. And so I'm learning how to minimize my suffering. And so that's a skill you can work on. Maybe I can't, like, I don't have the strength to get up and be the leader of that group. No way. I will never be that. But I can definitely, you know, try to not be at the tail end.
Sure. Cycling is one of the few sports that you can definitely work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Right? So it's one of those things where knowledge of drafts and how to get in and how to relax and things like that go a long ways. You can have someone that's much stronger than you, and you can keep up with them if you stay on his wheel. You know, it helps out a lot, but even that has its limits, right?
True, and that's why you need to supplement with structured riding. I've had some athletes where they just love their group rides, and that's really all they want to do, and that works for a couple months. You know, I was able to coach them. It's hard to work structure in. You can't really do too much. You know, you can say, okay, let's work on a little bit of cadence work, and it was mostly tactics. And so I would give them assignments of, okay, try this, try that, and But after a few months of that, you know, we kind of stagnated. There's only so much I can give people as a coach if all they're going to do is group rides. So you really do need to, you can keep your group rides, and the majority of my athletes who I coach do group rides. And I like to limit it at 2 per week. I think that's okay. That's manageable. Some of them do 3. But that's getting in the territory of, okay, you know, like, I don't know how much I can help you as a coach, because we're really only getting 1 or 2 structured rides in per week, because group rides are typically hard rides. And if you're riding hard 3 days a week, that's kind of your limit, you know? You shouldn't really be riding super hard more than 3 days a week. And if you're doing 3 group rides, well, there are your 3 hard rides. So you can't do hard structured rides.
It blows my mind that people in our area, I guess it's everywhere, but I can only really speak for our area, that people are willing to pay for a coach to go do a casual group ride or to become faster in a group ride, and never use that to go out and race and test themselves in that manner. Do you see most of your, like you said, most of your people that you're coaching, they're not racers, they're just group ride?
No, they do race. They do Grand Fondos, so they'll have a couple races, but they're not doing like the crits or things like that. Some of them are, but the older people are usually doing Grand Fondos or doing events or travel trips. I actually have a lot of athletes who are not racing, but they have, they're going to be, one is actually biking across the US in like 2 months.
Wow.
And I mean, that's a huge epic goal, you know. Another is just going to do like sort of a travel trip where for 7 days they're in the Pyrenees, and they just need to have that fitness. So they're not necessarily racing, but they are planning on these huge epic events. So I do have a lot of endurance riders more than, like, you know, crit, but I do also have some crit riders.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, honestly, the group rides, that is their race to them, and that's enough. And it's like sort of the no pressure, and I understand that personally. I love the group rides because it is sort of a race every time I do it, and it can be very rewarding in that sense. But at the end of the day, you know, if I miss the podium, so what? There is no podium. So it's like a less pressure.
Right.
Jill, I don't want to give away your secrets. You're a national champ in the Grand Fondo, but I do want to pick your brain a little bit, because we might have some people watching or not going to watch on YouTube who that's what they really want to do. And a lot of what I read is strategy on the segments. Do you want to share anything about your perspective on what you do without giving away?
Are we talking hacks? Are we talking hacks here?
Yeah,
it's not a
I'll
hack.
share
All
my
right.
secrets. That's fine.
All right.
No, I love this. This is what, like, it's all about strategy. You know, a lot of people think, okay, I'm just going to go ride it. And if you time trial it, you will not win. Like, your time will not be good. So it is a race, and each segment is its own race, which is really fun. So you basically get 4 races in this longer event. And basically you need people. You need to draft as much as you can. So you don't necessarily know who you're racing against, though, because someone could start behind you and be in a different group and do the segment faster. So it's almost like a team time trial. You basically, like a race, like a real race, start to finish, it doesn't matter how fast you go. It just matters that you finish first. So you could do a very slow race and then win. Well, if you do that in a Grand Fondo, you're not going to win. So you just have to go fast. And so drafting is very important. Staying with those wheels important, and that's where group riding can really help you. You know, I have a lot of people aiming for Grand Fondos now, and I'm telling them, okay, you need to go do group rides, because if you don't know how to, like, ride around a lot of people and draft and get that benefit, you're not going to do well. So I'm telling them, go do group rides to get that skill set. And then the little things, like if you are racing the people, like I did the national championship last year, I actually did start with the women, and we were all racing together, and I knew who my main competitors were. There were like 2 or 3 other women, and we were in that same lead group, because we all knew getting that big group with the fast guys and like kind of like draft the guys. And so I would enter the segment after those other women. I would enter last, and then I would move up and try to finish before them. And that is a great way to shave off a couple seconds. And that's what I did on each segment. So I never won any of the segments by a huge amount, but there were a couple segments where I won just by like 2 seconds, and only because I had entered after and finished first. So that's one tactic. And then definitely you need to know what each of the segments are. So you need to know roughly how long you'll be on them, because is it a 5-minute effort? Is it a 20-minute effort? You need to know to like judge how much energy you're expending. You need to know the terrain. Is it twisty? Is it up, down? I mean, it's like any race, you need to recon. And then the really tricky part that makes Grand Fondos really kind of difficult and unknown territory is if you find a great group in that first segment, awesome. You're not guaranteed that you're going to stick with them, because if they start hammering in between the segments, you have to make a choice. Do you stay with them and hammer with them and lose all your energy and then go slower perhaps, or drop them? Or do you just drop them and hope there's another group that comes that you can like and save your energy in between the segments? Because really you're only racing the segments. You can go as slow as you want in between, and the best strategy is to go pretty slow and save your energy, and then hopefully your group will stop at the rest stops to eat and not just blow past, because that's another question. If they're not stopping, you know, and you're out of water, well, okay, maybe you have to lose your group and get water.
Right.
2018, you finished second at the big stage. New York obviously is the big stage. 2019, you finished first. What did you do differently between 2018 and 2019 in your training, or your mental game, or your, you know, how you prepared? What did you do differently?
Well, so I think the preparation was very similar. You know, I was doing a lot of structure, just pushing it. I was training basically for that 20-minute climb up Bear Mountain, because I knew that's kind of where the race starts. And if you don't make it up Bear with the other people, you're done. So you have to like really be able to go fast up Bear Mountain. So that was the same each year. I trained for that. This was different because this is not time segments. It's start to finish. So of course, going into it the second year, you always know every race going into the second year, you always know it better and you can do better because of that.
Is it still called a Fondo?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was confused before. I thought all Fondos and all Grand Fondos were staged. And
there's like, there are lots of Grand Fondos, but the two kind of big series that I do is the GFNY series. And that's kind of more like they took that directly from Europe, where they are start to finish. It's basically like a race, like a road race. And those are not time segments. They do have chip time, but that's only, I think, because it's like a field of 6,000 people. So they kind of have to have chips, because like you might be in the line for 20 minutes just trying to pass the start. And the Grand Fondo National Series, that's the Frederick one. That's the one with time segments. That's the one that has a lot in this area that I think a lot of people are familiar with, the Frederick, yeah. And those are time segments, and that might, I think, I don't know if they started the time segment format, but they're one of the ones who really like developed that. So from that, the time segment has become more and more popular. But that's kind of, from what I recently read in an article, that might be sort of more an American invention.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because when you go to Worlds and you do Grand Fondo Worlds, it's not.
That's
it's not,
correct.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing I did differently the second year was I had a better start position, and that really makes a difference, because the first year I started around 400, which is still good. Like, they gave me a good position, but you know, in a race of 6,000 people, there's only so much they can do. You know, there are only a couple top slots. But the second year, because I had placed second, I was able to start right up there. So I was like standing right next to my competitor. And I remember the first year, I knew that first 10 miles, there was like this windy through the forest thing. And I knew that it was crucial. I had to get with the main group on that 9 miles, because once you turned out of that twisty, windy road, you got on a pretty straight, flat road. And if you're in a group, they're just going to take off. And I knew I would never see them again. And I was in the first year going down this windy road, and I was like weaving through, you know, the 400 people, and I could see them. I could see the group, and it was that last climb, and I was catching up. And the last climb before they turned onto that main road, and I was almost there, but then I missed it by probably like 15 seconds or something. And I knew at that instant, 10 miles into the race, I knew that's it. I'm not first girl, she's gone. And I would never see her again. So second year, I started towards the front and I just fought for that, to keep it. I didn't have to gain it the second year. I just had to keep it. And it's a lot easier to keep than it is to gain. So that's what I did. And I made sure I was in that group when we turned onto that straightaway road. And then from there, you know, like you're on the train. So I just stayed on that train.
Wow. What was your first gravel race, Jill?
Ooh, my very first one.
Yeah.
Oof.
I mean, we could talk about finishing second and unpaved, which is just amazing. But anyway, what was your first?
I don't remember what my first one was. Maybe like Stokesville.
Okay.
Maybe.
One of Chris's events. All right.
Yeah. I did a lot of local ones before I ventured out and did the bigger ones. Yeah, gravel was really, it is fun, and I want to get back into it a little bit more. I'm thinking of a new gravel bike. So I'm thinking that's going to be later this year once I get that bike. So I'll dip my feet in that again.
What was unpaved like? I mean, it's a big event, so.
Yeah, so that was actually also timed segments. So that was a good one for me because that's kind of like my bread and butter. That's what I love to do. So it was a rainy day. I remember it was very, very muddy, and I couldn't wear my sunglasses because they were just, I couldn't see anything. So I decided to not wear them, but my eyes got like filled with mud. And I just remember after that day for like 4 days, my vision was blurry. And I was really worried. I was like, oh my gosh, did I really mess up my eyes? And then I had like this nick in my eyelid for like, it's still kind of there because like one of the mud pieces had like injured my eyelid. I mean, it was crazy, but it was a great race. Like, there are very good women who came to that race. It was more technical. In one of the segments was quite technical, and that's sort of like, that's where I falter, is the technical. You know, I have the strength, I have the engine. If it's just like an easy flat road or going up, like I can do that. But when you add in big rocks and stuff, that's sort of where it was a challenge for me.
What's the hardest race you've ever done? Was that the hardest or no?
Well, that's a tricky question because hard can be many things. I think Unbound was hard because it was so long and I messed up on my fueling, and that made it incredibly hard. Ironically, physically, I wouldn't say it's a hard race because you're not doing particularly high power at any point. You're just kind of trotting along for like 11, 12 hours. So,
can you tell them how long Unbound is? There's people here that may not be familiar with that race platform. Can you give them an insight on what Unbound is?
Yeah, so it actually used to be called, gosh.
Dirty Kansas?
Dirty.
Thank you. It was so hard for me to switch from that to Unbound, and now it's like I've totally forgotten. Yeah, so, and that was like one of the first big gravel races. So that was kind of like the premier gravel race, and it was a very long one. They have different distances, but I did the full 200 miles. So it does take a very long time. And, you know, when you're out there for that long, food becomes almost more important than fitness. And that's the one thing I underestimated. And it was sort of a last minute opportunity that was presented to me to be able to do Unbound. It was not something that was on my radar. I really hadn't been doing much gravel racing at all. I'd done a few really short, like 40, 50 mile events. And then I had the opportunity to try it. And so I only got to prepare for maybe 4 months for it. And I think physically I prepared very, very well. And I did try to prepare nutritionally But in retrospect, there were definitely some sort of holes in my preparation that, you know, it's one of those things like there's just so much that go into a race. And, you know, I don't think I failed in my preparation. It was just, I was taking on a lot. And if I could do it again, I would definitely do some things differently.
All right, this is a selfish question. So I want to know about the nutrition failure. I want to know what you're going to do differently just because
So
we're
I was very focused, you know, like I know the carbohydrates, I know the calories, I know all of that. So, you know, I had calculated that. I'd been practicing. I used my liquid nutrition. I used my solid foods. Like I was doing, I did 100 and I think 50-mile race to practice. Everything was great. And so calorie wise, I was doing it correctly. What I think I failed on was not realizing that I needed way more salt and electrolytes and more than the average person. I think I made very salty sweater. I did do a sweat test and I was at the extreme value.
yeah.
And so I think if I had added salt to my water bottle, perhaps that actually might have made all the difference. And another thing is I might just not be cut out for these long races because I sweat so much that I have to drink like 3 times as much water as people. And how do you carry that much water? So maybe I'm just physically not made for this ultra endurance event. So that's something I'm still, you know, hashing around in my brain and trying to figure out.
Is anyone really made for that? Like we're talking 200 miles, 200 plus miles in conditions that aren't normal conditions most of the time. So you hit weather, you hit mud, you hit everything that you can hit. It used to be called the dirty Kansas. You're on flat ground that had the wind alone. You can be battling a headwind for 4 hours.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I got lucky. Like it was not windy, it was not raining, it was not muddy. But I went a couple days ahead of time to recon it, and I did some test rides. And I had always heard about the peanut butter mud, you know, and I was like, oh, whatever, you know, it's not that bad. It's just mud. And I drove to this one road that I knew was on the race. It was this kind of rocky, muddy section, you know, because there's some roads that are like very paved and like normal. And then there are some roads that were like really kind of like out of the way. So I wanted to try one of the more out of the way roads. And I started biking and it was muddy because it had been raining. And within like, I don't know, less than 50 feet, my bike just stopped moving. My chain came off, even though I had like a chain guide. I mean, I don't know how it even came off. Like, and I literally I had to walk my bike back to my car because I couldn't ride it anymore. It was just the wheels wouldn't move. And then I had like 3 inches of mud on my shoes by the time I got back to my car. I mean, I was just like, whoa, okay, peanut butter mud, it's real. Like, sorry for not believing you. I'm a true believer now. So yeah, those conditions could be totally epic. But that all dried up. By the time we did the race, like 2 days later, it was all fine.
That's cool.
That's a bad recon. You're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I don't know if I can do
No
this.
confidence. No confidence at all.
Yeah, I was like,
Right?
I was like, okay, if this is the conditions of race day, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like even walking, you know, you have to bring like a little stick or metal thing or something because one, you have to clear off your tires and your derailleur and all that so your bike keeps moving. But also if you have to walk in the peanut butter mud, and a lot of people do, they end up walking for miles during this race because they literally can't ride. Not my year, but the next year people were walking. You have to bring something to clean off your shoes because if your shoes are caked in mud, you can't clip in. So it's just this like constant battle of like cleaning your equipment off so you can actually ride.
Is this why you've done this foray into cyclocross recently? I saw.
I did like one race in cyclocross. Yeah. No, it was fun. I'm glad I tried it. Probably not gonna do more, but the atmosphere was really awesome, super welcoming and just really fun.
Yeah, I think cross and mountain biking, is probably, as far as spectator wise, they're probably the most supportive of people. You know, actually, I'm gravel also, cross gravel and mountain biking. The spectators are super supportive and make you feel like, even if you come in dead last, they'll make you feel like you're a champion.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's why a lot of people are crossing over from road to gravel, that and like safety concerns. But yeah, it's sort of a different atmosphere.
What are your future goals, race-wise, career-wise? Where do you see yourself heading?
So race-wise, I don't know. I never really plan out too far in the future with races because they just kind of happen. And like last year, I never planned out going to France. It was an opportunity. I went and I ended up doing 3 races there and stayed there like 6 weeks. And so really, I don't know what I'm going to be doing past May. So we'll see. So I might be in France again. I might be doing races. Most likely the Grand Fondo National Series this year. I am eyeing a stage race, a gravel stage race in Colombia next year because I'm running the Colombia trip, which I did this year. It was a great success, and so we're going to do it again, bring people over there. So anyone who's interested, let me know. And I want to coordinate it so after that camp, I will stay, have a week of recovery, and then potentially do this like 7-8 day stage race, self-supported type of gravel hybrid road thing. So that might be a big event for next year. I'm still figuring that out. But honestly, you know, I had a couple of really great years of racing, and I'm super happy and proud that I had a lot of successes. But, you know, I recognize I am getting older, and it's going to be hard to continue to get those overall wins. You know, I can still definitely be very competitive in the age group. And I'm also just getting tired. You know, racing is a cycle, and I had a couple of good years, and now I'm sort of, maybe I'm going into a bit of a lull. We'll see. But with that lull, something else is going to increase, and that's my coaching. So really, it's like I'm sort of trading the two. And this year, I've really expanded my coaching. I've taken on a lot more athletes. I've turned it into like a viable career. You know, it was never at that point before. For many years, I was working other part-time jobs and kind of hobbling my life together. But now, for the first time, I'm very just kind of confident in it being a good career choice and something I could continue to do. So that is sort of where my focus is going, rather than racing, is towards the coaching.
Mm-hmm. All right. Typical question we ask all of our people that come on is, what was your first bike and who taught you how to ride your first bike?
My very first bike, I honestly don't remember. I'm gonna say, well, I had lots of bikes, and I had like a bike in college just to get around. But I think the first bike that maybe started everything was my really bad bike in Japan that I think was left over from the woman who had the teaching position before me. It was like a rusty hybrid, you know, didn't shift thing. And that's what I would actually ride around the island at first. And I just thought, man, this bike sort of sucks. And so when I decided, okay, I want to try biking for real, I was like, I'm going to get a real road bike. And that was a Jamis. It was orange. And that was kind of like my first real road bike. I have since sold that bike. I called it Jamie, you know, Jamis, Jamie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We actually sell Jamis bikes here at Patapsco Bicycles.
It was a great bike.
Yeah.
I loved it. It served me very well.
They're great bikes, especially if you're not, if you want to have a good bike on a budget. It's definitely a really good bike to get. You get a lot of bike for money.
Yeah, agreed. And it was a very comfortable bike too. So
what are you riding now?
I am riding an S-Works Athos, so not a budget bike.
That's a great bike. That's a great bike.
Yeah, and
actually,
one of the lightest frames. Yeah, it's the bike that ironically has inspired me to get a bit more into gravel, because recently my gravel bike was a bit out of commission. I'm getting it tuned up, and so I wanted to ride some gravel, so I put on 32 gravel tires onto my Athos, and it was like the best gravel bike I've ever ridden. It was so much fun. I did single track on it. It just like,
I think you can get away with that with your body weight. I wouldn't recommend someone a little bigger going single track on their Athos, but
very true. And this is like easy single track. This is like baby single track.
So to put it in perspective, again, people that may not know about the Athos when it was launched a couple of years ago, is the lightest production frame made. So it's not designed to really do things that it's doing. They actually designed the new Crux.
Then that's the gravel bike I want to get, because I love my Athos on the gravel. So yeah, I'm gonna get a Crux.
It would be a good decision. That's what I'm riding right now.
Oh,
great!
Awesome. Yeah. I'm just waiting for stock to come in the world. Right now, they're all sold out. So
another plug for Patapsco Bicycles. We have all kinds of gravel bikes in stock. We have the new, and we got the new some of the new Cannondales in.
Oh,
come and check those out, definitely. But
awesome.
The Crux is an incredible bike.
Jill, how do people get a hold of you? Like, if they want you for coaching, if they want to go to Columbia, how do they reach you? And of course, you'll share this with us, and we'll put it in the notes when we post it on YouTube as well. But just plug yourself a little bit on how to get a hold of you.
So it's actually really easy. You can find me on Strava. You can find me on the internet. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook. I have a website. So if you just Google Jill Patterson Cycling, then a bunch of stuff will pop up. My website will pop up. You can get my email from there. So really, you can contact me through any of these mediums. I have people contacting me through all of those at different points. And, not people I've ever really met. They find me and they contact me. So I definitely welcome that.
And I'm assuming you still have some room for athletes?
I do. So I always have room. Right now, my monthly coaching is full. I have a wait list, but I can always add you to the wait list. But what's really popular, and I always have room for these, are the hourlies, where we just do an hour-long session and we can go over whatever you want. And I actually have many athletes doing that in lieu of the monthlies. So they'll do that like twice a month, and that actually works really well for them. We go over, we design a plan for them for 2 weeks. The next 2 weeks we meet, we talk about, okay, what did you learn? What do you want to do? What worked? What did not work? And then we make the next 2 weeks of a plan.
Great. And I'm assuming you can do that with anybody, anywhere at this day and age with the video conference call.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting because I can learn, I can know more about a person's ride just looking at the data than if I were actually riding with the person.
100%. 100%.
Data doesn't lie.
No.
I could lie about a ride, but my data doesn't.
Yeah.
Cool.
Donald, any last parting questions from you, sir?
SRAM or Shimano?
Oh. Well, I've never had SRAM, but I would have to say Shimano. I mean, I lived in Japan for 10 years. Come on, like Shimano all the way.
Yeah, that's about it. That's the one. I mean, electronic or non-electronic.
When I had not electronic, I was like, who needs electronic? That's so fancy. Yep. Like, no. And then I got it, and then I was like, I'm never going back. So yeah, electronic.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. How about you?
Me, I'm all SRAM. I'm all electronic. I got it to the point where once you start flying, you can't run again or walk again, right? So you start with the electronic stuff, and I even talk Paul into it. It's a no-brainer. Once you start using it, you're stuck, unfortunately. So I tell people, don't go down that path unless you're ready to spend the money.
Sure.
Because you will get hooked on it for sure.
Yeah.
There's a quick question that came in, Jill, from the audience. Do you do any weight training? Supplement your other training?
This is great because I see who asked the question, and I actually do weight training with his weights that he gave me. So yes, I do weight training 100%. Like, you don't want to do heavy weights all year round, but some form of weights. It's just, you know, not just for cycling, but just for life in general, especially women out there. You need to do heavy weights for your bone density, and as you age, it's super important.
Jill, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. You stimulate a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of people will watch the YouTube as well. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have you back too, because I think I've got 15 questions I didn't even ask at this
Right
point.
on.
So,
Yeah, thank you. This was super fun. I really appreciate that you asked me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, for sure.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Black and Tan fans. 0.0075% faster when you have Black and Tan tires, Jill, if you didn't know that already. But anyway.
All right, everybody. You guys have a great night. We'll catch up. Not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. We're going to do it again.
All right.